All right, we're on 16a. We really left off with a question. The question is, if the earth that is required, the dust, the earth that's required to go in the Sotah mixture, if one can use ashes. We explained our question more in detail, namely, the house of Shammai, which is of the view that dust and ashes are never to be conflated in scripture. And this applies specifically to the law of covering the conflated in scripture, even though they are written very similarly, afar and afer, afar with an ayin being earth or dust, and afer with an aleph being ashes. So because they cannot be conflated in the view of Shammai, with respect to the law of covering of the blood, kisri adam, it's a mitzvah to cover the blood of a slaughtered animal, the details of which are not relevant for right now, but that's the general law. And when there's an animal slaughtered, you take some dirt and you cover and bury the blood. So Shammai is of the view that you cannot use ashes there, because the verse says afar, the verse says earth, not afer, which is ashes. That's the view of Shammai. So in the view of Shammai, then, the verse over here with respect to the law of the Sotah also says afar, says earth, and therefore cannot use ashes. However, yeah, with me, Robert?
Huh?
With me?
Yeah. I just didn't understand. I didn't know the word conflated.
Sorry?
I didn't understand that word. Conflated.
Conflated means to be switched around, to be mixed up.
Okay.
Yeah. They can't be mixed around with each other, right? To be confused with.
Oh, okay. So you can't substitute.
That's right. You can't substitute
The
ashes for dust, scripturally speaking.
Okay.
Hillel, however, the house of Hillel cites to one verse in which the verse does substitute dirt for ashes. Example, when the verse says that you should take the ashes of the parah aduma, of the red heifer, the verse there uses the term afar, which means earth, right? Where's the verse we had? It's in Rashi. Yeah, when it says you should take, to purify the person, you should take from the afer sreifas achatos, from the dust or from the earth of the burnt offering. So it refers to the ashes there as dirt. It's really ashes of the paraduma, but the verse uses the word afer or afar, which is with an ayin, which is dust. So Hillel says, look, you see scripturally that sometimes ashes is referred to as dirt or dust. And thus the question becomes, in Hillel's view, are we allowed to use ashes for the Sotah water? Because we have elsewhere where the verse does compare dust and ashes. Following?
But it's
the comparison from dust to ashes.
They're only similar in that they're both powder, kind of.
Ashes are not powder.
Yeah, they become like ashes, and they come like when they come like fine dusted ashes, like all the way to the end.
You can use earth for ashes, but not ashes for earth.
Yeah, maybe. But what Hillel is of the view that because they are interchanged, therefore, when it comes to covering the blood, you can use ashes. So if Hillel says you can use ashes for covering the blood because the verse describes a similar thing with respect to the paraduma, then maybe you can also use ashes for the Sotah water.
I was thinking of ashes that are.
No. It means like, I think it means fine powder ashes, like all the way to the end. However, so that's one way of thinking about it.
Coals, right?
No, when you.
No, it means like you burn paper, you get like little like flakes.
You get little chunks.
Yeah. Burnt coal. Yeah, burnt coal. Ashes is like literally like dust. Like it becomes like gray powder almost.
No, after fire, from fireplace, that white powder.
Yeah, it's a gray white powder. Yeah.
I was thinking of ashes that are, they used to spray ashes on driveways and everything else. It's like little stones.
No, not like that.
Asphalt, no?
No.
Ashes?
No, asphalt is a mixture of some sort. No. Anyway.
They spray ashes all over.
No, it means the powder white stuff, or the gray white. Yeah. Okay, so then that's one way of thinking about it in Hillel's view, because the Torah uses ashes for dust or dust for ashes, and that's why you're allowed to use the ashes for the covering of the blood. Therefore, you might be able to also use the ashes for the Sotah water. That's one way of thinking about it. However, the challenge to this is, or the other side of the question, the other side of the coin is, the verse says that this dust, if we're going to call it ashes, has to come from the ground of the Mishkan. Because the verse uses the word ground, karka Mishkan, the ground of the sanctuary, that word ground should preclude ashes, because ashes doesn't come from the ground, right? Unless, when the verse says ground of the Mishkan, it doesn't mean literally the ground that's in the Mishkan. It's just to tell you a location, that if you needed to take dust from outside and put it here and then pick it up, or that the temple in Jerusalem is also valid, right? That was our earlier discussion. So if that's what the word ground of the Mishkan means, then maybe it does not preclude ashes. And then just take the ashes, put them on the ground of the Mishkan, and then put them into the cup. So we're stuck with this conundrum. When the verse says ground of the Mishkan, does that preclude ashes? Or no, it could be ashes also. Just ground of the Mishkan is there for a location issue. That's where we are right now. And the Gemara is going to go through a little bit of a winded discussion.
The ground doesn't mean ground.
That's right. Ground doesn't mean ground. It means location.
That would preclude ashes.
That's right.
Just the location, whether that it also includes.
Well, we're not sure. This is the Gemara's question.
Yeah, no.
When the Gemara says ground, doesn't mean literally ground.
So
Then that would preclude ashes. Or does ground mean exclusively location as discussed before?
Yeah. So that's
Either to tell you the location of the temple also is valid, or to tell you that you have to take
you go from outside
and put it
inside.
That's right. Either way, it doesn't preclude ashes.
In that meaning. Yeah.
Correct. So we're stuck with where to go. Is ashes okay in the view of Hillel or not?
See, this is what I thought was ashes. It's
Right. So that
black stuff.
we're talking about this.
Yeah.
It's also ashes, a big chunk.
Yeah.
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 Chunks.
But it seems like it's talking about the powder
Good.
ashes.
Yeah, they're straight.
You know, when you do the cut off of the chickens.
Yeah.
And use sawdust. At least where I went.
Yeah.
On Canada.
So, sorry?
They use sawdust and you do the kapara, you know, the kapara.
Yeah.
The chickens.
Yeah. So over there, that's right. When you do
I think
kaparas,
they use sawdust. I think it looked like sawdust.
You're not supposed to use sawdust.
Yeah.
It's from,
Supposed to use earth.
okay, we're going to see in a second about sawdust. We'll see in a second.
look like sawdust.
So the way the Gemara is going to come to a possible resolution is as follows. What the Gemara is going to do is, the Gemara is going to cite to a Mishnaic text, which gives us a list of times that the tradition that we have to Moshe Rabeinu, the halacha, that which has been passed down from Moshe Rabeinu down to us, comes to, I don't want to say circumvent, but comes to, seems to expand the literal meaning of the verse. And the Gemara is going to tell us 3 times like that. Now, what the Gemara is going to say is, if ashes is allowed to be used, then this should be included on the list of times where the verse is expanded. Because the verse says dust, afar, and we're allowing ashes, which means we're expanding the verse to mean more than its literal meaning. We're broadening the meaning to include ashes as well. Now, if that's the case, then the Mishnah should have added it to its list of times that the tradition suspends and expands the meaning of the literal verse. That's what the Gemara is going to do. But we have to go through the list. It's going to take a little while till we get through the list of times when the tradition suspends and expands the literal meaning of the verse. And the Gemara is going to conclude this is the exhaustive list, which means anything else, you have to stick to the actual meaning, which means therefore you can't use ashes. Following, that's where the Gemara is going. So just before we start where we're going.
This is the Amara then?
So the Amarayim, which means the Gemara.
They can't add to that one.
That's right. So the Gemara sages are looking at a Mishnaic text and saying this is the whole list. And we don't see anywhere on this list this notion that you can also use dust. So let's go through the list.
Okay.
Yeah. Tashma, come and listen. The Rabbi Yochanan said, Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, and the name of Rabbi Shmuel. There are 3 times, only three times. That halacha, that the halacha, which means like the tradition that we have to Moshe Rabeinu, the law that we have received by oral tradition back to Moshe Rabeinu and then to God, Like keves mikra, it just supersedes or suspends or expands the meaning of the verse. So here are the 3 times. Number 1. Torah says, Torah says that when you cover the blood of the animal, you should use dirt or earth. That's what the verse says. But halacha, the tradition going back to Moshe Rabeinu is b'chol davar. You can use anything, but not anything, only things that grow from the ground. So you can use a
Earth doesn't grow from the ground.
It doesn't grow.
no, it doesn't grow, but you can use anything else that grows to cover the dirt. And I'm assuming that's why they use to cover the blood. I'm sorry. I'm assuming that's why they use sawdust, maybe, because it's tree. Sawdust is tree. It grows from the
It
ground.
grows from the ground.
Perhaps that's why they use.
Byproduct of the tree.
That's right. Perhaps that's why. Okay, so that's one area where
So you can use a flower too.
it seems so. Yeah, you use a flower. That's what Rashi tells us. Hold on, anything that grows. Yeah, even that it even says things like earthenware that's been ground up. It's also out from the earth directly, but no, sorry, not anything that grows. Anything that causes other things to grow. So any form of
Okay, so earth causes stuff to grow.
right, but it could even be cement because it comes from the earth, or cement that's been ground up, or mortar that's been ground up. Not things that grow, things that cause things to grow. Things that cause other things to grow.
So sawdust can't work. Because nothing can grow out of sawdust.
Right. Okay, so you have to look up the laws over there. I don't know.
You could probably make things grow because it's an organic material. If when it breaks down.
Maybe. We have to look. The truth is that our subject here is not the laws of Kisei Adam, but we have to look those up to get any clear answers. I don't want to.
So that's what it says.
I don't want to say anything I don't know for sure. But the main point here is that the verse says specifically of our earth, but that meaning has been expanded to much more than that, to include ground up mortar, ground up earthenware, and things like that. Okay, so here's the first item on the list where the Torah gives one description, but the tradition expands that description.
So
that's number 1.
That's number 1.
Number 2, Torah says beta'ar, that the Mitzvah, right, the one who has that spiritual leprosy. No, sorry, the Nazir. The Mitzvah is coming soon, but the Nazir at the end of his during the time of his Nazir, when he's pledged to be a Nazir for a certain amount of time, or minimum is 30 days. So during that time, the verse says he's not allowed to cut his hair. But the way the verse says it is, don't use a razor on your head. So the literal meaning is don't use a razor. In theory, you could use scissors, something else. Says the Gemara of Halacha, but the tradition is b'chol davar. One cannot use anything to cut one's hair, whether you use scissors, a knife, blade, anything, doesn't matter, can't be done. Okay, so here's item number 2, where the Torah gives one word, which seems very restrictive, specifically prohibiting the use of a razor, and comes the tradition and says any cutting mechanism, any cutting material is forbidden for the Nazir. That's item number 2 on the list.
Good thing you mentioned that, because you can't use scissors, you can't use a razor, you can pull hair out.
I don't know if you got to pull the hair out either.
There's any other thing.
This is interesting because it's expansive in a way of
Limiting what you do, but expanding, yes. Limiting what the guy's allowed to do, but expanding the meaning of the verse, yeah. Whereas the first one, you're expanding what you're able to do as well. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Now the third item on the list is divorce. Torah says sefer, that the husband has to give his wife, if he's divorcing her, a book, sefer krisus, a book that separates between the two of them, a book of divorce, which would mean specifically some sort of scroll. Sorry?
get.
a get, but the get has to be written on a book. That's what the verse says, sefer, which means some sort of scroll. But the halacha comes the tradition and expands that meaning and says b'chol davar. You can use anything to give it to her. You can take a piece of paper. You can take a leaf. You can, there's lots. You can use anything as long as it's not attached to the. As long as it's not so far as I remember, as long as it's not attached to the ground. But you can give her. You can write it on anything. Write it on a piece of wood. Right? Even though the verse says sefer, a book, which implies some sort of scroll, but the tradition expands it. Okay, so those are the three things in our list, in which the Torah gives a very restrictive description of what is to be used or not to be used in the case of the Nazir, not to use a razor. And we expand it. Earth to cover the blood, we expand it to anything that causes other things to grow. Ground up mortar and things like that.
Could be manure.
So I was just thinking about that. Does manure count as well? You have to look up the law. Manure. We'd have to look up because it also causes things to grow,
Sure.
right? It's a fertilizer. So we have to look up the laws. We have to look up in Rambam.
If it has a foul smell, maybe problem with the bracha.
Sorry?
There's
No,
a
we can
foul
look it up.
smell
It's
from
what are we
there.
looking at? We're looking at the laws of what? Of Kisyadam.
Saying God's name.
Sorry?
Saying God's name in front of excrement
Is a problem. Kisyadam, let's see.
The idol worship.
See if I can pull up the Rambam quickly.
the bow, right?
Yeah, that's quite an interesting one.
His name be erased.
Okay, we'll have to look up the Rambam to see the exact laws. Okay, so those are the three items on the list. So there's that. There's the Sotah. There's the Nazir, where the Torah says cannot use a razor, but we say can't use anything. And there's the divorce paper, where the Torah says it's got to be a book, a scroll, and we allow for anything upon which you can write and hand her this bill of divorce. So now the Gemara says, back to our main point, the Im Isa, if we're going to allow ashes to be used for the Sotah, let the list also include that. There should be a fourth item on the list. Torah says you have to use dirt for the Sotah, and tradition says you're allowed to use ashes as well, but it's not on the list, which seems to indicate that you can't use it, because if it was, you can't use the ashes as a substitute for earth, because if you're allowed to, it would have been on this list.
On the list to expand the word.
That's right. So the Gemara says, no, this list is not exhaustive. And how do we know it's not exhaustive? Because there are elsewhere other things on the list. So if this list isn't exhaustive, then it's no indication of the fact that ashes may or may not be used. If this was it's no proof. If it's not one way or the other. If this was the end of the list, there was no other item in which the tradition expanded the meaning of the verse, then that would be the limitation. But because there's elsewhere other texts which also expand the meaning of the verse, it means this list is limited. It's not the end of the list. If it's not the end of the list, then maybe ashes is also allowed in a kind of expansion of the meaning of the verse. So says the Gemara, Tana v'shir. The Mishnah H text taught these three teachings, but left behind others.
Wait, I'm sorry, what was it?
Tana v'shir. Tana, we were taught a list, but v'shir left behind. It wasn't exhaustive. It left other things out. My shir, what else did it leave out? The high shir that's making you confident that it also left out the issue of ashes. We need to find somewhere else. This is the Gemara's analysis. We need to find something else that we know for sure this list that's left out of the list, and then we could say maybe also the ashes is left out of the list. So what else did it definitely leave out? Says the Gemara, Shir Mitzayra. It left out a law regarding the Mitzayra. Regarding the Tzardas, the one who gets the spiritual, skin discoloration as a result of spiritual affliction. Tanya, I try not using the word leprosy, because leprosy, I think, is actually a medical term, is it not?
It's a term for another disease.
That's right. And when you use leprosy, it sounds like a medical condition. This is not a medical condition. This is.
They equate Sarat with it closely to gonorrhea.
No,
Leprosy. People usually refer to it as
leprosy.
Changing the color to white.
That's the Sarat.
Yes. So people.
What's the other one called? That's similar to gonorrhea. Not exact, but it's.
The Zav.
The Zav.
Zav.
Sorry, I got it mixed up.
Zav might be gonorrhea,
Zav.
yeah.
It's not exactly.
Might be.
It's similar.
Yeah, but actually, because Zav seems like a natural phenomenon. The way the Torah describes Zav is a natural phenomenon.
Right.
So which then it could be gonorrhea, right? But
It's
Mitzvah,
spiritual, right.
Tzaras is not
Lashon hara,
a natural phenomenon. So calling it leprosy makes it seem like it's a medical natural phenomenon. It's not.
No.
It's a skin discoloration as a result of God afflicting someone for spiritual defect.
Right.
Okay, so let's just call it the Mitzvah.
Do it on houses. It's done on house.
Houses or a person. Here we're talking about a person. So the Tanya, because you learned in a Mishnaic age text like this, you've asked in the past that we point out principles, the 13 principles that we list before we daven. The 13 principles of which Torah is interpreted, right? Just before we say Haidu, we say there are 13 principles by which the Torah has arrived. We've used Gzei Shavah before, Kal V'chomer. So one of the principles is as follows. It's klal uprat uklal, I etadan elo ke'ena prat. That's the description, which means when the Torah says klal, a general statement, and then prat, a specific statement, klal, general statement. You can take the city, you'll see it. Klal uprat uklal, one of the first ones.
Go ahead.
No, it's not one of the first ones. Found it?
Almost.
Klal, prat, uklal. A general statement, followed by a specific statement, and then followed again by a general statement. Or another way of putting that is inclusive, restrictive, and then inclusive again.
Inclusive, restrictive, inclusive.
Yeah. So when you have such a thing, where the Torah says a statement that seems to be inclusive or broad, and then the Torah specifies what it means, and then the Torah again concludes with a broad statement, then somehow, whatever you include in the broad statement must carry similarities to this specific statement. Otherwise, in other words, like this: had the Torah wanted something specific, it would just say the specific. Had the Torah wanted to make it as broad as possible, the Torah would have just said the broad. But here the Torah says broad and specific, which means, therefore, it's not restricted just to the specific because it's a general statement, but the general statement cannot be expanded more than something similar to the specific.
It's like an intermediary.
Something like that. So let's see how it plays out. You'll know what I'm talking about.
You know which one is it? I found it, but I don't know.
Here, give me some else.
13 it is. It's this one right here. It starts there. I should have looked for the word cloud.
Number 6.
Oh, it's on my underline.
There you go. So let's see how it plays out here. You'll know what I'm talking about. So the verse reads, "V'haya b'yom hashvi," that will be on the 7th day of this Mitzvah, this guy with the saras. He's excommunicated from the community for a certain period of time. So on the 7th day, Yigaleach kol sa'are. He should shave off all his hair. So this statement, shave off all his hair.
That's the 7th day?
Yeah, yes.
Sorry.
This statement, all his hair, is a general statement without any specification. All his hair, anything. Okay, so klal, here's a general statement. Here's an inclusive statement. But then the verse goes on and says, Es roshai, shave his head, there's ziknai and his beard, there's gabas einov and his eyebrows. So this is prat. This is a specific statement. First, you just finished saying shave off all his hair, but then you went on to say shave his head, beard, and eyebrows. So now you're specifying. So it's a klal, a general statement, and then prat, a specific statement.
Yeah.
Right. But then the verse goes on to say, "Ves kol sa'arei yigaleach," and all his hair should be shaven. So chazav klal. Sorry.
Does that include his arms?
So let's see. Chazav klal. So the verse then goes again and gives an inclusive statement. So you have an inclusive statement, all his hair, specific statement, head, beard, eyebrows, and then again, general statement, shave his whole thing.
Right.
So what do? So the rule is, klal upratu klal, when you have a general statement, a specific statement, and then again a general statement, iyatadan, you only judge ella ke'ena prat, only similar to the specific. Okay, so what are the specifics here? So we can't just stick just to the specific because the Torah expanded it. But we can't expand it to all the hair because the Torah gave specific. So what are the specifics? The specific was head, beard, and eyebrows. So let's find some commonality between these three and then make a rule about the commonality. And that way we've expanded the specific. Following?
Yeah.
So what's the...
You don't just take You don't just take the specific, you're gonna have to analyze the specific and come up with a common.
That's right. And give it an expansive interpretation. Because that's right. Because the verse itself said to be expansive, but it's got to be expansive relative to the specific. So take the specific, find the commonality, and expand it accordingly. So namely, ma prat, just as these specific items, head, beard, and eyebrows. Mafurash, makim, tinus, sar, vinira. It's a specific space in which hair is supposed to grow in clusters, and it's visible. It's not concealed somewhere in the body, some crevice of the body that you can't see. And it's not a random hair growing out of nowhere. It's parts of the body that are meant to have a bunch of hair growing, the beard, the eyebrows, and the head. And it's visible, it's open, exposed, everybody sees it. So av kol makom kinusar, so to any part of the body that is supposed to be a place of hair that grows together, and venira, and it's exposed, that too should be shaven.
Grows together?
It grows together in a cluster, and it's meant to grow in a cluster.
Okay.
Right, it's meant to grow in that spot, and it's exposed, it's open. That too has to be shaven. Okay, so what is that? The Gemara says, Mashir, what was it? Sorry, let me look 1 second. I lost this already, 1 second. I think that's I want to make sure I'm getting it right. Yeah. Yes, thought so. Okay, so it says the Gemara. So Mashir, where am I lost that place? So Rabbi, what was included? So the Torah said head, beard, and eyebrows. And we said the commonality is it's a place in which hair grows together and it's open to the public. So any other part of the body that has hair grows together, it's open and exposed, that too has to be removed. So my Rabbi, what was included in that list? Rabbi Sira Glayim. We've included hair that grows in the legs. Because legs are a place where hair grows in clusters, for adults at least, and just like the beard is for adults only, actually. So
and it's visible.
And it's visible, it's open, it's not hidden behind some part of the body, it's open. So that's got to be removed.
Could be the arms too, right?
I suppose the arms is similar as well. I suppose the arms is the same.
Neck.
I'm sorry?
Neck.
No, sorry, not. No, Sira doesn't mean hair, it means pubic hair. That's what I thought, because it grows in clusters like that, not just randomly. The hairs in the leg it's not a place in which a cluster of hair is meant to grow together.
So it has to be not.
That's right. Just like the eyebrows.
Not grows in clusters.
Sorry?
So it's not grows in
No. Look, what are the commonality between beard, eyebrows, and head?
Grows in clusters.
They grow as a group. There's a group of hair that comes out here. There's a group that comes out in this space and a group that comes out in this space. They grow in a group and they're open, they're exposed. So the pubic hair also, there's no part of the body that's concealing it. My clothing are concealing it. 1 second, my clothing are concealing it, but it's not concealed by any other part of the body, and it grows as a group. Okay, that's what it means. They're glad, and that's why it's not the feet. It's the pubic hair. Okay, my miyat. So what's being excluded? What's being excluded from the list? What hair grows in the body that lacks this criterion? Says the Gemara, miyat beis hashechi. It excludes the armpit hair, which even grows in a group, and it's meant to grow there, but it's concealed by the body itself. The body itself conceals that hair. Right? And likewise, the kula gufe, hair on the rest of the body, which I imagine includes arm and legs, because it doesn't grow in a group as it does on the head, beard, and eyebrows. Okay, clear?
Wait, arms and legs are excluded because although it's open it doesn't grow in clusters.
That's right. So there's different parts that expand that lack criteria. The armpit hair grows in cluster, but it's not exposed. It's concealed by the body. Whereas the rest of the hair is exposed, but doesn't grow in a group. So the only thing that would be included on the list here is the pubic hair, because the eyebrows, beard, and head is already stated specifically, and we're including as well the pubic hair.
Pubic hair isn't exposed.
Okay, so it's concealed by my clothing, but the body itself doesn't conceal it.
Oh wait, it is included?
Yes,
Oh, sorry.
pubic hair is included on the list. That's what we're adding to the list.
Got it.
Even though the verse doesn't state specifically pubic hair, but we're adding to the list because it shares commonality with beard, eyebrows, and head, in that it grows in a cluster and it's not concealed by the body. It's concealed by my clothing, but it's not concealed by the body. Okay. Now, this is all what the verse would mean if we took it literally. But this is one of the items in which even the literal verse says only these four parts of the body should be shaven: beard, head, eyebrows, as it's stated explicitly in the verse. And then the pubic hair as well has been included because of the similarities. But hilchasa, we have it by tradition that megaleach kedalas, the person should be shaven like a squash, meaning completely nothing. All hair is removed. So here we have.
So in other words, they're not following the.
That's right. So this is a fourth item in which the meaning itself is restrictive, but the tradition is expanded. So now the Mishnah H text we quoted earlier, which only had three things on the list, which had the Nazir can't use anything, not just the razor, and you can use other things to cover the blood of not just dust. You can use anything else that causes other things to grow. And
The
woman divorced doesn't have to be a paper; it could be anything. And we suggested maybe that's an exhaustive list. And if it's an exhaustive list, then that would mean ashes cannot be used to the Sotah, because that too would be an expansion of the meaning of the verse. Now the Gemara is telling us that list is not exhaustive.
Right.
What's the proof it's not exhaustive? Because you have a different Mishnah H text which expands a different law. The Sotah. The Sotah, if we were to stick to the Sotah itself, and the Sotah has to be shaven at the end of 7 days. If we were to stick to the literal meaning, of the Sotah, we would go with head, shaving his head, shaving his beard, shaving his eyebrows, and shaving his pubic hair. But we have an expansive tradition that says shave the entire body. So back to square one. Is ashes allowed to be used or not allowed to be used? We can still go either way because we have no exhaustive list that says this and nothing else. Clear? Sorry?
I lost that last one. I thought they were using the Mitzvah as an additional to the three.
That's correct. And from the fact that the other Mishnah, which said the list did not include the Mitzvah on the list, means it's not limited to three. There could be others.
Well, this is one of them, right?
That's right. So maybe there's another one, which is the ashes.
Right.
So we have no conclusive.
This is in favor of using ashes, right?
It's no conclusive proof.
But why? I'm sorry.
Why should it be conclusive?
Because it's expanding the three.
But where's our source for that? Where's our source that we're expecting?
It's a Mishnah.
1 second. There's a difference between lack of proof for not and proof for yes. The fact that we've expanded number 3 to 4 only means you have no conclusive proof that ashes can't be used. It doesn't mean you have to use ashes now. We have no conclusive proof yet that you're allowed to use ashes. We just have no conclusive proof that you can't use ashes.
For sure.
Following?
Yeah.
So we're back to square one.
Okay.
This list
So
is
that's just a counter argument.
correct.
Whoever raised this.
Whoever raised that text, which says there's 3 and no more.
You may use ashes, but it doesn't say you're.
It doesn't mean it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
No, I mean, you're not precluded.
We don't know yet if you're allowed to use ashes.
No, you don't know.
That's the point. We tried to prove it by saying there's 3 things that we expand the meaning and 3 and no more, which means you can't use ashes. But now that we see it's not 3 and no more, there are others that are also have expanded meanings that were not listed. So maybe the ashes is also one of those things. And therefore maybe yes, maybe no.
Okay.
So back to square one, we don't know if we can use ashes or not. Okay, but before we even get there, the Gemara is going to cite to a Mishnaic text which proves that you shave everything. So we'll read that and we'll conclude there.
Mishnah is Mishnah text that says you shave everything.
You shave everything for the Mitzvah. The Tanan, because we just finished saying that the literal meaning of the verse would be only head, eyebrows, beard, and pubic hair. But the tradition says shave everything. So here's the proof, Mishnaic text, which proves you shave everything. Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnaic text, when it comes to shave the Mitzvah, Maver Taral Kolpsare. He has to take a razor and put it over his entire body. That's the verse, right? Maver Taral Kolpsare. Where's the verse? No, we don't have the verse here. Sorry. Yeah. So Mavital Kopsare, he has to take a razor to his entire body. But this is referring to the first time they take him out at 7 days. The Katani Seifa. But later we learn in the same Mishnah text. And the seventh day he's to be shaven. And we are taught when you shave him at the second set of 7 days, it should be shaven the same way you do it in the first set of 7 days. Right? There's depending on what happens and what you identify, what the Kohen identifies on the skill discoloration, if it expanded. It didn't expand, all the details are not important right now. But there are certain times when the guy's got to stay out of the community for 2 sets of 7 days. And at the end of each set, you got to shave. So the first time around, 1 second, he definitely has to shave the entire body. And we have a Mishnaic text which tells us that even the second time he also has to shave the entire body. Because the second shaving should be the exact same thing as the first shaving. And therefore, the earlier text, which limited the second shaving to 4 parts of the body, has been expanded by tradition. Clear?
Still don't understand why I don't shave the under the armpits.
We do.
Oh, you do.
We do. How do we take, sorry?
Too fast.
So where are you?
So you're saying there's another text that says you shave everything.
We
You took the literal text of eyes, beard, and head, but it's somehow been expanded to include all
everything. That's right. So we asserted that even
because there's 2 sets of 7-day shavings.
that's correct,
One on the first 7 days,
which is definitely the entire body.
Apparently, it wasn't conclusive with the priest.
That's right. So we're not going to go to why that is.
Okay,
Right? We're not going to go why that is. But the reality is, we're not going to go into why that is. Why there's
No, it doesn't matter.
doesn't matter. The point is, this person, because of his circumstances, is going through 2 sets of 7 days.
And each
At the-
time the shavings are identical.
That's right. That's exactly because the verse we quoted earlier, which seems to limit the shaving to only 4 parts of the body, is a reference to the second set of shaving, the shaving at the end of the second set of 7. But since we have another Mishnah text which compares the second set to the first set, and the first set definitely has to be the entire body, so likewise the second set has to be the entire body. So here is the source for this notion that the second set is the entire body, thus expanding the literal meaning, which would have limited it to just 4 parts of the body. Okay. But the main point, going back to the original point, is this indicates to us that the original list that we had of 3 items in which the tradition expands the meaning of the verse is not an exhaustive list. And if it's not an exhaustive list, it doesn't preclude the notion that maybe you can use ashes for the cycle. That's where we are right now. So God willing, tomorrow we're going to get closer to a resolution at least. Okay, let's see. I know this. We switch from talking about, midrashic ideas of teshuvah, and we go, the Gemara takes us to dive headfirst into halachic analysis, but it's part of the learning process. No. The Gemara goes diving one way or the other in extremes in minutes. Okay, wonderful day, everybody.
So you say the second,
Sorry?
the
Yeah.
second shaving, which is everything, tells you that the first.
All the way around. The first one definitely has to be everything.
Okay, so that tells you that the second one has to be.
Everything as well, even though
Not limited to the.
that's right, not limited to what the verse says, which would imply only 4. Yeah. Okay, wonderful day, everybody.